After Nicolas Winding Refn's great success with Drive, film buffs were excited to see Refn's next promising film, only to be baffled by Only God Forgives. This essay deconstructs the failure in the eyes of the general public. This film is a curious case to study because in the eyes of the classic Hollywood executive producer, it has all the proven elements from a Nicolas Winding Refn success story. Yet its failure proves that maybe there isn't a formula for success. Is it a revenge story? Check. Do you have Ryan Gosling as your dazzling protagonist? Check. Does it have a damsel in distress? Kinda. But if we squint our eyes and look closely, we realize that it doesn't even qualify for a revenge story. First, a disclaimer. Not only does this essay analyze the crap out of Only God Forgives, but I also compare and talk about the film The Shining and a little bit of Drive. Not only Refn uses similar composition techniques, but he also uses similar story elements. So if you haven't seen any of these movies, are you mad? Go and watch them immediately. All of them are amazing, including Only God Forgives. The plot in this movie is so scarce that you can summarize the entire film in one sentence. A man kills Ryan Gosling's brother. Then his mother forces him to take revenge. But being a Nicolas Winding Refn movie, it's a little bit more complicated than that. The first image we see is that of a steel blade. This sword has a very specific meaning and is not revealed until the last scene. Julian, the protagonist of this story, appears next to a golden statue of a Muay Thai fighter. Julian is the owner of a Muay Thai boxing club, where it serves as a front to sell drugs. Julian's brother Billy is involved in pedophilia activities and violence against girls. One night, after having sex with a 16-year-old prostitute, Billy kills her. We then see Julian looking like a creep, only staring deeply at his hands. At this point, we don't really understand what the director wants to tell us, but the fact that his arms have a lot of screen time means that the audience is told to feel the importance towards Julian's hands. The only feeling that we could extrapolate from this shot is that of remorse, and when he's having a private encounter with a prostitute called May, she restrains his arms while he watches May pleasure herself. This gives the idea that Julian fetishizes not using his own hands, trying to be as passive as possible, even if a beautiful woman is in front of him. After this, Julian goes to a dark room where he sees a vision of someone cutting his arms. The police arrive at the crime scene where Billy murdered a girl. A strange man with no police uniform arranges the father of the prostitute to take revenge for his daughter. The man starts to beat and subsequently kills Billy. The man with no uniform, or Chang as we later learn, takes the vengeful father to the middle of the road where the father starts begging for his life. Chang questions the fact that the man was forcing his daughter to work as a prostitute. He then cuts one of his hands as a warning to not let that fate happen to his other 3 daughters. At first, Chang appears to also be part of the police, but we quickly realize that he represents something else. The idea behind this reasoning is the music. This character makes it clear to the audience that he is otherworldly. I have to compare it when Kubrick used Ligeti's score in The Shining. The mood is almost identical every time we experience the presence of Chang. The nature of Chang is the reason why most of the people who watch the movie hate it, or at least don't fully understand what's going on. I will cover this later when I give my interpretation of the film. Julian's hand symbolism keeps showing throughout the whole film, and as soon as we see these shots, when Julian keeps staring at them, we realize that Chang's vengeful father's arm mutilation is not just a coincidence, and when Julian fantasizing in not using his arms is directly related to what Chang will probably do to him. At this point watching the movie, the audience probably already knows the final outcome of the film. Julian's arms are going to be mutilated just like in his vision, and this is going to give him some sort of pleasure. This is one of the great faults of the movie because it comes at the first third of the movie. It is not hidden well enough to be a surprise on the final act, even though we don't necessarily understand why this is important. Julian then investigates and traps the vengeful father. The film fades the sound away as the vengeful father explains what happened with Chang. It's important to notice that we don't hear the explanation and we only see him showing his arm stump as a proof that he already paid for Billy's death. I'm going to return to this point later. Julian then lets the man leave after hearing what he said. Julian's mother, Crystal, arrives at the hotel, and we quickly learn that she isn't a person that you want to mess with. The relationship between Julian and Crystal is abnormal to say the least. The film, with only body language, suggests a mother-son incestuous relationship. Crystal sends someone to kill the vengeful father, and eventually also learns about Chang. Julian also learns about Chang, but does not seek revenge. It's up until his mother confronts him that he decides to take action. This kind of passive protagonist is also another problem that the audience confronts while watching the movie. In the diner scene, we learn that Julian may or may not have been jealous of his brother, and we further learn the mother-son relationship is even more abnormal when Crystal compares his two sons' penises. Refn hints at the Oedipus complex, with Julian staging a dinner with Mai, only to make it obvious that there is a really big incestuous problem going on that the movie does not address. The police visits Julian's boxing ring, questioning him for the assassination of the vengeful father, although it was Crystal who sent the hit. While Julian is talking to the police, Chang is then surrounded by Muay Thai fighters, giving him an honorable salute. After the questioning, Julian follows Chang to the city streets, where he disappears in thin air. This is a key moment, and this is where the film fragments between a straight-up vengeful movie into a metaphoric battle against supernatural forces. Meanwhile, Chang has several scenes where he sings karaoke. The lyrics repeat over and over, "I won't forget, I won't forget." The atmosphere in these scenes is always hypnotizing, with Eastern flavor songs, complementing the dark mood of the film. When Crystal's men fail to kill Chang, he discovers that Crystal is behind the hit. She becomes the new target. Julian finds Chang in one of these karaoke places and challenges him to a fight. Chang destroys him, not letting him land a single punch, and from the style of fighting we can discern that Chang is an incredibly good Muay Thai fighter. The film goes back and forth comparing Chang and the golden statue, revealing Chang is the golden statue. Chang goes to Crystal's hotel room, and while begging for her life, she reveals that Julian killed his father with his own hands, which explains why he keeps looking at them with remorse. Chang pierces her neck and leaves. At the same time, Julian kills Chang's wife and let his daughter live. The film ends with a shot of Chang and Julian in the woods. Julian willingly lets Chang cut his arms. As soon as the blade cuts through Julian, a lullaby song is heard, with Chang singing at the karaoke. Being honest with this essay, I have to say I didn't understand the ending on my first watch. Having a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes intrigued me, and I decided to find the reason for such a bad score. Before talking interpretations, metaphors, and film analysis, I want to describe the taste I had after watching Only God Forgives. I was baffled. I thought I missed a scene that could explain the ending, but I knew that this didn't happen. After googling Only God Forgives explanation, I had an epiphany. Wait a minute, Chang is God? When I typed this on my laptop, I realized that the main hint was in the title, and it made me feel like a dumb person. But then I started thinking more about it, and it made me realize the main problem with this movie. Where does the film show that Chang is God? Although there are hints all through the movie, it never gives a clear statement. At first, I thought it was just a few movie reviewers looking too much into the movie, looking for answers. But then I read on a press note with the reference revealing the original concept. The original concept for the film was to make a movie about a man who wants to fight God. On a second view, yes, all of the hints are there, but I knew the secret this time, which made it somehow simple. But I had to watch it at least 2 times. The smart director had me twice. Now, after watching it 2 times, let me try to explain what I got from Only God Forgives. Chang is the personification of God, and being cut by his sword means forgiveness. The hands represent the sins of its user, so every time Chang cuts someone's hands, it means that person has been his sins forgiven. When Julian challenges Chang to fight, one of the policemen asks him, "Do you know who he is?" This can have two interpretations. Either Chang is the former Muay Thai champion, or he is God. Both could be true, as when Julian is fighting, we see the golden statue of Chang. Although this can be just a reveal that he's a good fighter, it could also reveal that he is God. In the karaoke scenes where Chang sings, it feels more like a mass than an actual karaoke club, and even Julian doesn't interrupt him when he sings. When he sings the lyrics, "I won't forget, I won't forget," repeated over and over, hinting that he is a vengeful God and that eventually he's going to get you. The whole man decides to fight God thing is one of the film's metaphors, but it's not the main theme. The main theme of the movie is a sinner seeks forgiveness for their sins, and eventually he does, which is an eerily similar arc to a revenge story. A sinner man and a vengeful man both seek something, but only one of them can take it by force. The title will give us a small insight into what Refn wants to tell us. When Julian keeps looking at his hands, we now know that it's because of the burden of killing his father, or even more. So he's seeking forgiveness in his actions. When Chang mutilates the prostitute's father, he's forgiving him, enforcing God's fear to not let his daughters into prostitution. After the prostitute's father talks to Julian, he understands that he received God's punishment for his actions. He knows that he can't take vengeance for Billy because he only atoned for his sins. When Julian grabs Chang's blade and cuts his mother, he forgives her and all of the problems she gave him. But what was the reason this film failed? When the ending shows Julian willing to be mutilated, we realize that this film wasn't a straight up revenge movie. And I think this is where most of the people decided not to like the movie. At least I thought I didn't like the movie. This is one of the biggest genre twists to swallow. When a film decides to change its genre somewhere in the middle, people tend to roll their eyes because the tone of the movie changes drastically to what we got used to. Films like From Dusk Till Dawn or Full Metal Jacket or even Psycho have always had an audience predilection for some half of the movie. The point where I knew this could happen was when Julian was following Chang and suddenly he disappeared. That gave me a bad taste of the supernatural. Now, I'm not saying that this is always bad. What I'm saying is that discovering this aspect at the ending was way too late. Julian doesn't really have a motive for revenge. He knows his brother was evil, and he knows he probably had it coming. When the mother forces him to take revenge, there are no stakes at all. The whole thing with Julian killing his father with his own hands could have been expanded, and it could have been involved in the film if we actually saw how Julian killed his father. To me, all of this felt like it was a sequel to Drive, with the driver atoning for all of the sins, but this is obviously just Refn acknowledging that this is a really similar character. This movie shares a lot of similarities to Kubrick's film methodology in cinematography, music, pacing, and storytelling, especially in a technique called X-formation. X-formation is a term coined by Danish science writer Tord Norethrander's, and it's a term to describe when information is explicitly discarded. This technique makes the work feel shallow, yet we're able to discover the main message regardless of the missing information. Consider The Shining. Jack Torrance goes to an insulated hotel as a caretaker, only to become insane. But why does he go insane? Kubrick uses this information hole to reinforce the supernatural. When Stephen King refilmed his own version and described that Jack Torrance was an alcoholic, this destroyed this vacuum and made it too easy for the audience to swallow. X-formation also occurs in Refn Only God Forgives, removing the information that Chang is God, but this time it acts against the movie, and it doesn't have nothing to do with the film itself, but on the audience. Revenge porn is somehow considered to be one of the lowest common denominators for film genre. This is not me just being snobby, just ask a film buff to combine a canon Charles Bronson revenge movie to a Shane Carruth over complex metaphoric film nightmare. They are not compatible. However, Refn is so good that he almost successfully achieved this. Another thing that the audience probably didn't like was the pacing. Nicolas Winding Refn lowers his pacing to Stanley Kubrick levels. I personally didn't find it bad, but there's a reason why it doesn't work with this kind of movie. First, Stanley Kubrick pacing has always been a problem to me, but I find it adequate when it's used in a mysterious genre. This works in The Shining, because we don't know what we are getting into, and he hints the supernatural early in the movie. So when this suspense comes, you can savor every long suspenseful second he takes. I still cringe when Jack Torrance is talking to Mr. Delbert Grady in the bathroom. Although you shouldn't compare films like Drive and Only God Forgives, they are a unique example when it comes to film analysis. This is because of casting. Refn has explicitly talked about how both protagonists are the same person, and it shows. By the time people enter the movie theater and see Julian acting so similar to the driver from Drive, we start to equip the baggage from the previous character. This is a double-edged sword, because of two things. As Ryan Gosling also stars on Refn's next film, we expect to see a straightforward movie, only to get a whole metaphoric ending. It also doesn't help that he hesitates every time Julian is in front of his mother. I've heard a lot of people compare Julian's hands with some sort of sexual metaphor, and it makes sense when he touches his mother's corpse with his hands. The whole Freudian desire is obvious through the whole movie, but it doesn't make sense that he will restrain his hands in front of a prostitute, or maybe that's his way of celibacy. That's a mystery that only Refn can clear. All in all, Only God Forgives is a fine movie. The composition and cinematography could rival Stanley Kubrick's, and that's not an easy feat. The director transformed Bangkok into another character in the movie. Only God Forgives is a must-see movie from Nicolas Winding Refn.